NASA has stated that the current period presents a significant and crucial chance to focus on the planet Venus. This follows recent revelations about the potential for life on the planet. If you happen to examine NASA's archives from the 1960s, you would observe the space agency referring to Venus as a planet of judgment. Meanwhile, Mars became our primary goal. Such specific naming of primary planets was unusual during the intense space race era. The Soviet Union, at that time, was concentrating on Venus, a harsh planet that seemed nearly incapable of supporting life. Despite this, the Soviet space program didn't discontinue the Venera mission until after the fall of the USSR. Thanks to Neil deGrasse Tyson, we now have a clearer understanding of their objectives. Let us delve into the declassified images of Venus taken by the Soviet Union. The collapse of the Soviet Union had far-reaching implications beyond just shifting global politics. It also locked away many secrets, as the Soviets were known for their obsession with secrecy, from managing the world's most covert intelligence agencies to their guarded approach regarding their true capabilities. It is plausible that extraterrestrial contact was among those secrets held by the USSR, which still holds many untold mysteries. Prior to the United States surpassing many planetary missions in space, the Soviet Union led the way. While the USSR had a mixed record of space mission successes and failures, their focus was primarily on Venus, a planet that presented enormous challenges. In Russian, Venus is called Venera, which was also the name of their mission that spanned from 1961 to 1983. While the U.S. was engaged in its lunar missions during the same period, the Soviets opted to allocate their resources towards Venus instead. The Soviets' obsession with the second planet from the Sun might not seem entirely out of place when you consider their strategic objectives. Did they view Venus's surface as a potential source of energy, or were they perhaps considering colonization? Despite their intense interest in searching for activity beneath Venus's surface, the question remains, why were the Soviets so determined to focus on this unforgiving planet? The answer remains unclear, as they were not entirely transparent about their intentions. Most of what we know about the Soviet Venus missions comes from declassified and archived documents. After decades of effort, pinpointing the exact purpose of these missions and whether the Soviets ever uncovered the planet's secrets proves challenging. The Soviets didn't land on Venus once or twice, but many times, in fact. They launched 28 costly rockets toward the planet, and 13 of those managed to enter the Venusian atmosphere. 8 actually touched down. These sophisticated missions placed the Soviet space program in a dominant position for space exploration. Although the U.S. was a close second, NASA was more focused on satellite development and innovative technologies than on the search for life on other planets. Their attention was more directed toward Mars, which wasn't particularly unusual or negative. You may not find this in history books, but the Soviet space program was the first to send a probe into the atmosphere of a planet beyond Earth. Moreover, they achieved other remarkable feats. The USSR became the first nation to perform a soft landing on another planet and send back images and sounds from its surface. In fact, the Soviets had their own equivalent of one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, long before the US did. Why, then, don't we often hear about these achievements? Part of the reason lies in the Soviet Union's penchant for secrecy. This is just one of many factors that explain why the Soviet space program is often overlooked. In 1992, the Soviet Space Agency was decommissioned following the collapse of the USSR, and the program had to be revived under the new Russian identity, Roscosmos. Many of its original records were either lost or destroyed, which is why the reasons behind the 28 Soviet missions to Venus remain unclear. Despite this, a logical guess could be that the Soviet Union's interest in Venus was partly due to cost-effectiveness. This doesn't mean they overlooked the planet's potential. They were investigating aspects like water levels, sunlight radiation, and the general characteristics of Venus. Without a series of these missions, it would have been extremely difficult to study Venus's high temperatures and dense atmosphere. Today, many astronomers believe that Venus, with its extreme conditions, cannot support life. The surface temperatures are hot enough to melt lead, and water is exceedingly rare. Additionally, the thick atmosphere causes the air pressure to be roughly 90 times higher than on Earth. Yet, despite these harsh conditions, space exploration continues. Ignoring the Soviet Union's contributions to Venus exploration would be a revision of history. For the Soviets, Venus was a planet worth exploring, even if more hospitable planets like Mars were also considered for fueling the space race. Exploring Venus, however, was less costly. Distance plays a significant role in this. Venus is, on average, only about 40 million kilometers from Earth, while Mars is about 250 million kilometers away. The vast distance to Mars made missions to it much more expensive. Had the United States not been the world's largest economy, exploring Mars might not have been as feasible. Reports suggest that Soviet missions were risky, with many technical challenges. The rockets simply weren't equipped to cover such vast distances. Additionally, the Soviet space program had a history of losing contact with rockets. This may explain why they opted for the more economical and closer target of Venus, which would provide useful results. However, the space race itself cannot be ignored in understanding the full story behind the Soviet Venera missions. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite, which marked the beginning of the space race. Both the US and the Soviets were determined to outdo each other in space exploration. At the time, NASA was failing in its attempts to send probes to Venus, a series of setbacks that came to be known as the Venus curse. Every time NASA launched a probe, it failed to make it into Venus's atmosphere. This is when the Soviet Union saw an opportunity to capitalize on these American failures. The Soviets quickly moved to claim the first victory in the space race by focusing on Venus, a planet that the US had struggled to explore. Despite limited resources and unstable government support, the Soviets repeatedly launched missions to Venus, maintaining their lead over the US. The US, meanwhile, focused on the Moon. This strategic decision wasn't without political and ideological undercurrents. The Soviet Union used clever propaganda to obscure their failures with Venus. The American government, alarmed by the USSR's obsession with Venus, began questioning the Soviets' motivations, branding Venus as an evil planet while Mars was marketed as humanity's ultimate goal. The Venera missions, though often overshadowed in history, were incredibly advanced, ambitious, and sophisticated. In the 1950s, the Soviets began developing probes and conducting tests for their Venus missions. These efforts continued for the next 30 years as they built and launched spacecraft. The early years of the Cold War provided the Soviets with significant resources, more so than the US, which proved invaluable. They were able to construct large rockets designed to break through high altitudes and cover vast distances. They also worked on both manned and unmanned rockets, with the Soviet academic community developing advanced calculations and evaluations for navigation during Venus missions. The Soviets' Mars programs were also in motion, but nothing was more important than creating the necessary instruments for these Venus missions. This led to significant breakthroughs in space exploration. In 1966, the Soviet Union launched Venera 3, the first artificial probe to enter Venus's atmosphere and successfully land on its surface. This achievement escalated the competition with the US. While American missions were beset by failures, the Soviet program kept progressing. However, the Soviet missions to Venus were constrained by the limits of their spacecraft designs. Nevertheless, the Soviets overcame these challenges and launched the most advanced probes of the Venera program in the 1970s. The simultaneous launch of Venera 4 and Venera 5 in the 1970s was one of the most remarkable feats in space exploration history. The US tried to develop similar launch strategies, but why did the Soviets opt for simultaneous launches? The answer lies in the fact that interplanetary travel requires advanced instruments to gather the most data. The probes launched during this period were designed to study Venus's surface. Venera 4 succeeded in entering Venus's atmosphere, and Venera 5 was designed to collect more detailed data on the planet. The Soviets aimed to withstand the challenges posed by Venus's extreme temperatures, pressure, and radiation. By the mid-1970s, the Venera missions were entering their most advanced phase. Everything the Soviets had done up until that point was aimed at improving and refining their interplanetary travel techniques. The next major milestone came with the launch of Venera 7, which became the first spacecraft to send back data from Venus's surface. This accomplishment marked a significant milestone, providing critical insights into Venus's extreme environment. By the early 1980s, Venera 13 surpassed earlier missions in complexity. It captured panoramic images of Venus's surface, while Venera 14 gathered similar data. As the Soviet Union recognized Venus's significance, their space agency revived their mission plans in collaboration with NASA, intending to study the planet's atmosphere and geological history. The upcoming Venera mission, which is a joint project between Roscosmos and NASA, is expected to launch in the late 2020s or early 2030s to further explore Venus's atmosphere, surface, and potential for habitability. The Venera missions, while technologically groundbreaking, also had a significant cultural and political impact. These missions, launched at the peak of the Cold War, symbolized the fierce competition between superpowers in space exploration. For the Soviets, the success of the Venera missions was not only about scientific discovery but also about showcasing their technological prowess and ideological superiority over the U.S. Each Venera mission marked a key moment in expanding humanity's knowledge of the solar system, from the soft landing of Venera 7 in 1970 to the panoramic images captured by later spacecraft. Despite the challenges, the legacy of the Venera missions remains an essential chapter in the history of space exploration. The impact of the Venera missions was far-reaching, both in terms of technological advancements and their broader implications for future space exploration. These pioneering missions played a critical role in advancing our understanding of Venus and the challenges of space exploration. Despite facing extreme conditions such as scorching temperatures, crushing atmospheric pressure, and thick clouds of corrosive sulfuric acid, the Soviet scientists and engineers behind the Venera program demonstrated remarkable perseverance and ingenuity. One of the most critical aspects of the Venera missions was their focus on unmanned probes, which set a precedent for future planetary exploration. The data collected from these probes gave scientists vital information on the surface conditions of Venus, its atmosphere, and its geological history. Moreover, the technological advancements developed during the Venera program, such as heat-resistant materials, advanced communication systems, and reliable landing techniques, paved the way for future missions to other planets, including Mars and beyond. Additionally, the Venera program also advanced the scientific community's understanding of planetary environments that were previously thought to be inhospitable. The discovery of Venus's extreme surface conditions, including its high surface temperatures, dense atmosphere, and sulfuric acid clouds, was an essential contribution to planetary science. The data provided by the Venera spacecraft significantly expanded our knowledge of planetary atmospheres and contributed to the development of future spacecraft capable of exploring other hostile environments, like those on Mars, Jupiter, and beyond. In a geopolitical sense, the Venera missions also had a significant impact during the Cold War, serving as a symbol of Soviet technological superiority. During the space race, each superpower sought to outdo the other, not only in scientific exploration but also in demonstrating their technological prowess. For the Soviet Union, the successful execution of the Venera program allowed them to maintain their position as a leading force in space exploration, despite the fact that the United States was making significant strides with the Apollo missions and other space ventures. The Venera program thus became a critical part of the narrative surrounding the Soviet Union's technological and ideological competition with the U.S. Despite the challenges and setbacks faced by the Soviet space program, the Venera missions proved that perseverance and innovation could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. The success of the Venera missions was not just about scientific discovery but about demonstrating to the world that the USSR was capable of leading the way in space exploration. The missions were a testament to the Soviet Union's commitment to space exploration and its desire to showcase its technological and scientific capabilities. Looking ahead, the legacy of the Venera missions continues to influence contemporary space exploration efforts. The upcoming Venera mission, a joint project between Roscosmos and NASA, will build upon the accomplishments of its predecessors. This mission aims to further explore Venus's atmosphere, study its surface, and search for potential signs of past or present habitability. The cooperation between Russia and the U.S. in this mission is an indication of how the spirit of collaboration in space exploration has evolved over time, from the Cold War competition to today's more cooperative efforts. The continued study of Venus, fueled by the groundwork laid by the Venera missions, will provide invaluable insights into the planet's history and its potential for supporting life, whether in the past or in the future. Venus, once considered a hostile and unwelcoming planet, is now being revisited with renewed interest, and the scientific community is eager to unlock its mysteries. The technological advancements that stemmed from the Venera program have not only contributed to the exploration of Venus but have also influenced broader space exploration efforts, paving the way for future missions to other distant worlds. Moreover, the Venera mission's focus on unmanned probes and advanced instrumentation was a defining feature of the Soviet space program. By focusing on robotic exploration, the Soviets demonstrated a capacity for technological innovation that was unparalleled at the time. This approach laid the foundation for the future of space exploration, where robotic probes continue to play an essential role in exploring distant planets, moons, and other celestial bodies. In conclusion, the Venera missions stand as a testament to the Soviet Union's pioneering role in space exploration. Despite facing numerous challenges, including technical failures, hostile environmental conditions, and the complexities of interplanetary travel, the Soviets' determination and innovation led to remarkable successes. The Venera missions not only expanded humanity's understanding of Venus but also contributed to broader advances in space technology and planetary science. Today, as we look ahead to future missions to Venus and beyond, the legacy of the Venera program remains a cornerstone of space exploration history, highlighting the resilience and ingenuity that continues to drive our quest to explore the unknown.